Hello again. It's good to see you. Today I wanted to talk about something different than usual. Pretty much on the same theme, but just a little bit different. Because usually I talk about my favorite books. I talk about my favorite books for my undergraduate in history, my favorite war books, my favorite top 10 novels of all time that I posted 2 weeks ago. But today I wanted to talk about something a little bit more specific, and I wanted to talk about my favorite characters of all time. Now, a lot of times what makes a book my favorite is the characters that populate that story. That's what makes that story so great. So some of these I definitely have talked about before, but I'm specifically talking about the characters instead. So some of these are new books, some of these are books I've mentioned before, some of these books I might have talked about in greater length, but overall we're generally talking not about the book themselves, not about the quality of the writing or the quality of the story, but instead just about one specific character. So I'm going to go from 10 to 1, and I hope you'll stick with me. Sitting at number 10 is Dashenko from Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead, and she is the main character, main narrator of this story. Now, what makes Dashenko so interesting is she is this eclectic older woman living in this remote Polish village, and she is viewed as an outsider by the people living within the village and kind of her distant neighbors, because she has a really odd belief system, or a belief system that at least they view as odd, and she has a really solitary lifestyle. And what is so compelling about her is she fiercely believes in animal rights, and she's really outraged by the way that the wildlife is treated within this village, more specifically by the local hunters. Because in her eyes, hunting is murder of animals, because a life equals a life. That's what murder is. And so she believes that these animals deserve more rights, and that they should fight back against these oppressors, these hunters. And Dashenko really predicts events using a combination of astrology and her own moral belief system to kind of create this rationale for what's happening in this town, what her actions are, and it blends together this kind of mysticism with this intellect and moral system that she has created. And so through her eyes, she believes that everyone in this town is a hypocrite and environmentally destructive, and she believes that a lot of these people are simply evil, again, especially the hunters in this area. And her narration style is really insightful and looking within and thinking about herself, but it also comes out as incredibly unreliable because it's hard to grasp a real picture of what is actually concretely happening because she has such a strong compass headed in her own direction that you're not really getting a true full story. Kind of until the end, eventually things get pieced together. But her actions kind of blend together justice and vengeance, and she believes that these animals should take matters into their own paws, into their own hooves. And I don't know, it's just captured in a really odd way through her eyes, through this strong belief system, through her interest in astrology and predictions, through just her odd character traits and the way she interacts with everybody. And another thing that I think is kind of funny about this story is the way that she interacts with names, with her own name and with the names of her friends and her neighbors. Because her name is Janina, I believe, or Gianna or something. But she will not be called that. She doesn't like to be called that. She believes that that's not her name. It doesn't suit her. And so she names everybody around her. She gives them their own nicknames. Like, One guy's named Oddball, one guy's named Bigfoot. She gives all these people names that she believes suits them. So another layer on top of this unreliable narrator thing is you don't even know what these people's names are because she's naming them Oddball and Bigfoot, etc. And so while this book isn't my favorite book of all time or anything, it was a fun and interesting read. But what made this book good is that the main character just made the story. Because without such a strong and compelling and oddball main character, this story wouldn't have been able to capture its purpose so well. So sitting at number 10 is Dushenko from Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. Sitting at number 9 is a character that actually is never named. The unnamed narrator of White Nights is my 9th favorite character of all time. So the best word to describe this narrator is the dreamer. That is often what he refers to himself as. And this is a very idealistic and generally introverted character that lives entirely in his own imagination. And so he has a hard time differentiating where this reality sets in and where his imagination really lies. But what our narrator really is looking for is just a connection with somebody. That is all that he is longing for. And so in this book, White Nights, our narrator, the dreamer, finds this woman, Nastenka, I believe her name was, and these two talk for a couple nights in a row in snowy Russia. And the two of them have a series of conversations that is both enlightening and introspective to the dreamer. And his relationship with Nastenka invokes this or brings about this feeling of it is possible for me to feel real love and for me to get real love from real people. And so while he's gaining this love and this actualization from Nastenka, he's also just feeding into his own delusions. Because one thing that is really interesting about this story is that the name Nastenka is spoken by the dreamer, I think, almost 200 times in this little tiny 100-page book, and the dreamer's name is never spoken by Nastenka once. So clearly this is a really one-sided interaction that this narrator has deluded himself into believing is this real, deep human love and connection that he has been longing for this whole time. So in his couple nights with Nastenka, he experiences joy and heartbreak and, in the end, this painful self-awareness that his delusion was not reality. So there's, within this character, a tension between what is real life and what you wish to happen. Kind of your inner dreams versus the harshness of reality and the harshness of real life. And so while this character can never be fully fleshed out, especially within a short little novel like this one, and especially if he is never even given a name, I think that you really connect with the humanity of longing and want and dream and delusion and desire all within this character in a really beautiful setup. Some of the lines in this story that are spoken by this narrator are simply beautiful. And the way that this narrator describes his surroundings shows that he has a deep connection with the world around him, even though he can't really feel it. He does have this deep connection and this deep understanding of what's going on around him. Like whenever he's walking down the street, he's saying hello to the houses. He's saying, "Good morning, how do you do? I am quite well, thank God. I have come to a new story in May. How are you? I'm being..." And then the house says, "How are you? I am being redecorated tomorrow." Or, "I was almost burnt down and had such a fright," and so on. And so, I mean, he's longing for these interactions, but it is clear that he can form connections even if they're a delusion. So he's connected with the homes in the street. He's connected with the the seasons and the coming and changings of the seasons. And overall, he is just begging for human connection. And so I think that this character is used really well as a vehicle for want and overall delusion. So sitting at number 9 is the unnamed narrator for White Knights. Sitting at number 8 is Stevens from The Remains of the Day. So what this story is this is simply a butler driving across the English landscape for a few days, and overall the entire story is just him reflecting on his career as a butler and just his life, his professionalism, his dignity, and just anything that comes with him being a butler. And so Stevens is really, really devoted to his craft. He believes that professionalism is the highest moral structure that one can reside within and under. And Stevens really sees his entire self-worth through the eyes of his employer, this Lord Darlington. And so he believes that his job is his entire being. He is a butler, and that is what he is, and that's the beginning and the end of it. Stevens equals butler. But as he reflects on his actions, he really thinks about how dignity is what he believes to be the highest point of being. And to be a good butler, you have to consistently be this character. He says that a butler of any quality must be seen to inhibit his role utterly and fully. He cannot be seen casting it aside one moment, simply to don it again the next, as though it were nothing more than a pantomime costume. There is one situation, and one situation only, in which a butler who cares about his dignity may feel free to unburden himself of his role. That is to say, when he is entirely alone. So throughout Stevens' entire life, he has simply been this. He's just played this role, and that has been his full self-perception. So his duty has really caused him to repress his feelings and his opinions, kind of at the emotional toll of himself, in which he kind of hadn't realized at the beginning of this car ride, but he kind of starts to figure out as he is driving. And it also kind of shows the cracks, as he's reflecting on this, it kind of starts to show the cracks of, since he fully put himself on the servitude level, and he fully put Lord Darlington above him, he believed that whatever Lord Darlington said was the best way to do. And he believed that his own personal opinions on matters, his own personal opinions on politics or the nation overall, didn't matter. He acted as a vehicle in which Lord Darlington carried out his career and his belief system himself. So as he is reflecting on Lord Darlington's political beliefs, he says that, "Let us establish this quite clearly. A butler's duty is to provide good service. It is not to meddle in the great affairs of the nation. The fact is, such great affairs will always be beyond the understanding of those such as you and I, and those of us who wish to make our mark must realize that we must do so by concentrating on what is within our realm, that is to say, by devoting our attention to providing the best possible service to those great gentlemen in whose hands the destiny of civilization truly lies." So again, that is just himself putting himself in this level of servitude again. But what is so compelling about Stevens, and why I believe that Stevens deserves to be on this list, is that as he thinks about these things, I can really appreciate a character that values something very, very highly. So by valuing duty and professionalism and dignity and loyalty in such a high degree, I give value to Stevens as a character. And it is possible through this story for him to think about these things and come to a truer realization of these things while still sticking to who he is as a person and still sticking to his belief system. So it's what's compelling about Stevens is that he has all these really strong morals, and even as he reflects on them and realizes some wrongdoings and realizes some things that maybe these morals aren't helping him on, he still sticks fully to who he is. So that is why I believe that number 8 belongs to Stevens, the butler, from The Remains of the Day. Sitting at number 7 is yet another unnamed narrator, and that is the unnamed cat narrator of I Am a Cat. This is a book that I will definitely be talking about again at some point because this is one of my favorite books that I've read this year, but that's not why we're here. We're talking specifically characters. So, the cat narrator from I Am a Cat is super witty and can still make these intelligent statements. So what this book is it just follows our cat as he is viewing the citizens of Japan at the turn of the 1800s into the 1900s, and that is the Meiji era of Japan. And this cat lives within a house of a really pompous yet seemingly stupid professor, teacher, just a pompous, silly guy. And this cat who wanders into his house one day and just decides to stay. This cat just watches these people, watches his owner, his owner's wife, the kids, the friends that are invited into his home. And this cat just watches these people and forms opinions on them. And this cat is so incredibly funny. The cat makes these really piercing, just ironic and witty statements, judging these people inside and out. So through his observations of the middle class in Japan in the Meiji era, he really looks at hypocrisy and pompousness and just vanity and pretension and just all of these qualities that make these other characters so funny to look at. But through the eyes of this cat, that is what makes this book so compelling. Because this cat can speak these sentences that are so piercing and intelligent and thought of fully and calculated fully, yet the cat can still simultaneously act incredibly cat-like and chase his tail or climb on a fence or whatever a cat would do in the early 1900s in Japan. And so this cat doesn't just stay at home. This cat not only watches the people at home, but he also takes adventures into the yard. He sees interactions with the local schoolboys. He goes into the bathhouse and has a lot of negative things to say about the naked people in the public bathhouse. So this cat, as the eyes of both an insider and an outsider, can really look at just the absurdities of human convention and what normal people do in society, but through the eyes of a cat, these actions appear so weird and so outlandish. So this cat is so much fun. And he weaves together these tales and these explanations for things that it's just funny to remember that it's a cat who's talking. Like the cat even thinks about Nietzsche and his Übermensch. How does the cat know Nietzsche? I don't know, but overall, this cat is so funny and so intelligent at the same time. So I really recommend this book. I recommend this character in this book because this cat can be so intelligent, yet so funny and so feline at the same time that this book just became so compelling and so much fun. Crime and Punishment is one of my favorite books of all time, but this character sits at number 6 on this list, and that is Razumikhin from Crime and Punishment. What I like so much about Razumikhin is this is actually the first one on this list that isn't the narrator of the story. Razumikhin is actually the main character's best friend, even though Raskolnikov, the main character, may not even want Razumikhin to be his friend. At many points in time, he's really irritated by him. But in the end, they are best friends, basically because Razumikhin has decided we are best friends, so they are. But Razumikhin serves as this compassionate, kind of like emotional counterpoint to Raskolnikov. So where Razumikhin is moral and warm and emotionally understanding and intelligent, Raskolnikov is the complete opposite. He is tormented and cold and distant and a little bit crazy too. So Razumikhin really serves as this like interesting counterweight to our main character Raskolnikov. And Razumikhin can really represent that it is possible to have actualization from being good and being helpful and being a friend, rather than Raskolnikov's take of just trying to be intelligent and try to think things out in the most practical way. So from being sincere, Razumikhin comes out on top, whereas Raskolnikov struggles. And Razumikhin's strong loyalty to Raskolnikov, even when he doesn't really understand Raskolnikov at all points in time, really show that he has this like ability for genuine friendship even in times of despair and agony and misunderstanding. So in the end, Razumikhin's stability and kind of love for Dunya can kind of give like a moral ground that like a future that Raskolnikov might be able to get to someday, because they both started from the same law school. They were students at the same law school. They were kind of the only ones that had true competition intellectually with one another. And so they took completely different paths. So in the end, if it's possible for Razumikhin to have this stability and this love for a woman, it would thus be understandably logical to believe that Raskolnikov could then come to the same actualization himself. So, while Crime and Punishment's main character, Raskolnikov, is an incredibly interesting character to look at, there's a place in my heart for Razumikhin because I think I just really enjoy those characters that have a strong understanding of their own stability, their own morality, and their own friendship and love for one another, even if they don't understand them. So I very much liked Razumikhin. And sitting at number 5 is probably the most memorable character and the most well-known character from literature ever, and that is Don Quixote from Don Quixote. So what makes this story so funny is what this story is about. It is about our main character, Don Quixote, and he reads too many stories about knights and chivalry, and he loses his mind, and he starts to believe that he is a knight, he is chivalrous, and the world is calling to him to be this knight within the world. So he goes crazy, he gets on a horse, he names his horse a fun knight name, he finds a squire, and with this squire, Sancho Panza, he goes off and has these episodic adventures where he fights windmills in the sky because he believes that they are giants. He runs into people that he believes are princesses that he needs to save, and just overall gets into these really ridiculous situations that are fully caused by his own insanity. And that's what's so fun about Don Quixote. He's crazy, and that's what's so fun about him. But what is interesting about him as a person is that he is still within his right mind enough to be very intelligent and emotionally understanding. So whenever he's bringing forth these sentences and these proclamations, Don Quixote speaks incredibly intelligently, while also being, of course, absurd and ridiculous. So with Don Quixote, through this story, you can tap into both your intellect and your humor in really good ways. So this is a story that, while rare, can do both. It is both intelligent and it is both funny. And so Don Quixote, again, just goes on these ridiculous adventures that are just fun. And that is what makes him such a memorable character. And so he just overall embodies the human drive to dream and to desire and to want something greater than himself. So even though the world points and laughs at these dreams and mocks these dreams and doesn't understand his dreams, he still believes in them. And that is what is so compelling and lovable. He believes in his dreams and he is going to make his dreams happen. And I think that that is why so many people connect with Don Quixote, is that he's a dreamer and he's going to make it happen. And so through Don Quixote, you can come to the conclusion that dreams, even if they're crazy, is what makes life worth living. And so through this fun and episodic and ridiculous story, you kind of believe in yourself more, and you think, if my dreams are crazy, I'm going to make them happen anyway, at whatever cost. Because if Don Quixote can do it, so can I. So from this lofty idealism, you can bring in your own earthly pragmatism into your own life and connect it to who you believe you are, who you believe you can be, because crazy Don Quixote can do it, and so can I. So that is why Don Quixote is sitting at number 5. Sitting at number 4 is Yossarian from Catch-22. Now, this is the main character of this story, and what is so compelling about Yossarian is he seems to be the only one who has even a grasp on reality, and who is the only one who is thinking rationally in this completely irrational system that he seems to be placed within. So Catch-22 is following this USA bomberator in World War II, and Yossarian is finding himself within these absolutely ludicrous scenarios that appear to be no fault of his own. So he seems to be the only one that can see the madness of war, and he doesn't think that he should have to give his life for this madness and this mad system that he is placed within. And so while others just accept that nothing makes any sense and the bureaucracy of war, everybody's just pretending like it makes sense to them, Yossarian outwardly defies this system that he is finding himself within. And that makes him both cynical and super funny and deeply human, because nobody wants to die in war, especially when they believe that they don't deserve it because this system is so unbelievably crazy. And so, like, his sarcasm and these absurd encounters that he finds himself within are what makes him so compelling. So one of my favorite passages in all of literature ever, and absolutely the funniest thing that I think I've ever read before, is whenever Yossarian claims to see everything twice. And I might have even read this passage before in my favorite war novels video, but I don't remember if I have, so I'm going to read it to you anyway. So Yossarian is trying to get out of war, and so he is in the the med tent, and he believes that if he pretends like he is sicker than he is, then he can get more time in the hospital and he won't have to go back out to war. And so while he's in this hospital situation, a man is wheeled into the room, and this guy is crazy and he sees everything twice. And so because this guy sees everything twice, he is put in a room of his own, he is secluded, and he gets more time in the hospital. And so Yossarian gets a lot of inspiration from this. So Yossarian was still in good health when the quarantine period was over, and they told him that he had to get out and go back to war. Yossarian sat up in bed when he heard the bad news and shouted, "I see everything twice," in inspiration from the other guy. And so the doctor comes up to him and says, "How many fingers do you see?" "Two," says Yossarian. "How many fingers do you see now?" the doctor said, holding up two. "Two," said Yossarian. "And how many now?" asked the doctor, holding up more. "Two," said Yossarian. So the doctor's face wreathed with a smile. "By Jove, he's right. He does see everything twice." So they rolled Yossarian away on a stretcher into the room with the other soldier who also saw everything twice and quarantined everyone else in the ward for another 14 days. "I see everything twice," the soldier who saw everything twice shouted when they rolled Yossarian in. "I see everything twice," Yossarian shouted back at him just as loudly with a secret wink. The walls, the other soldier cried. "Move back the walls." The walls, Yossarian cried. "Move back the walls." So one of the doctors pretended to shove the wall back and said, "Is that far enough?" The soldier who saw everything twice nodded weakly and sank back into bed. Yossarian nodded weakly too, eyeing his talented roommate with great humility and admiration. He knew that he was in the presence of a master. His talented roommate was obviously a person to be studied and emulated. During the night, his talented roommate died, and Yossarian decided that he had followed him far enough. "I see everything once," he cried quickly. And then they go through the same system of every finger that the doctor holds up. Yossarian says he sees it once, and the doctor says he's healed, and he goes back to war. But I think that that passage is so undeniably funny within this situation that Yossarian is just undeniably an incredibly funny character. And what I also thought was interesting about Yossarian is how in this story he's mirrored to Raskolnikov from Crime and Punishment. And I think that that's a really interesting character to bring in to this story. So a Russian classic literature character who axe-murdered the corrupt pawnbroker is compared to this American bomberator in World War II. I think that that's a really interesting connection, but it connects the two on this fear and paranoia that are constantly on their minds, and just it kind of foreshadows like how this paranoia and this irritability can really lead to his own demise. And so a couple times Yossarian is mirrored to Raskolnikov, which I just think is interesting on a character level. So his sarcasm and his absurd situations really expose how institutions care more about winning a war or following a motive than they do about the value of a human life. And Yossarian appears within the story to be the only one to truly understand that. He sees that everybody is out to kill him, and everybody is out to kill him specifically. Even though it's a war, they're trying to kill Yossarian. And so over time, his selfish desire for survival evokes this moral resistance within him, turning him into this symbol of individual consequence within chaos, if that makes sense. But long story short, Yossarian is just the funniest character I've ever read before, and also he is symbolic of many things, and he is a vehicle with which to talk through just the insanity of bureaucracy, especially within war. Yossarian can do it all, and he does it all very funny. So that is number 4, Yossarian. And sitting at number 3 is Archimboldi from 2666 by Roberto Bolaño. I talked about this at great length in my top 10 books of all time video that I posted the other day. So I want to specifically talk about Archimboldi at greater length, but I'm talking about different stuff. So Archimboldi is this reclusive and mysterious novelist that kind of his life story is one of the central mysteries of this novel and one of the central narratives of the novel. And so his experiences in World War II, both seeing true and honest brutality, but also seeing the moral collapse of both himself, other soldiers, people that he interacts with, and just the moral collapse of society overall really shape his further understanding of human nature and his further writings as he begins to write later in life. And so Archimboldi is kind of used by Bolaño as a purpose in which to show that Bolaño, the author, believes that true artists, true authors, have a constant battle between connection and alienation from human suffering. So that is something that Archimboldi really seems to be battling with and just interacting with throughout his story. Because Archimboldi attempts to isolate himself from the world around him by coming up with a new identity, writing stories, and then disappearing, and just generally not letting the world in on who he is and what his background was. And it kind of, Archimboldi kind of shows that art can endure, literature can endure, even as an author is fading into obscurity. And so through Archimboldi, you kind of see this connection between, or this tension between creation and disappearance and disillusionment. And what also was so much fun about Archimboldi is, this is just a author Bolaño thing, but Archimboldi's backstory was written about with such full-heartedness, full thought. His backstory and his entire life is told about so very fully in the way that it is never redundant. It is never too much. It is the perfect amount of everything about Archimboldi. So with this fully fleshed out character, you are truly interested in everything that he does. And I think that it's also interesting just to see him change over time, because as a kid, Archimboldi was really interested in the science of water and algae within the water. And so he would just dive into the water and be within the ocean all the time as a kid. And that was the only thing that interested him, was just going into the water, diving into the water, looking at algae, and his eyes were constantly bloodshot because that's all he wanted to do was look around at this life under the sea. And so moving from that as a kid to him getting his first job within this kind of rich family as more of like a servant character, or like a servant position, but he becomes friends with the, boy of the house, just moving from that servitude and friend position into being a soldier in World War II, and reading this journal that he finds, and he connects with this voice of this journal that he's reading. Like, it's clear that Archimboldi is able to connect with people where they are. So Archimboldi in his childhood connects with his dad, who only has one leg because he came back from World War I with one leg, and he misses the Prussians, and where is the Prussian Empire? And Archimboldi connects with his father in that way, where he is at. Archimboldi connects with that boy that he was supposed to be the servant of. He connects with him where he's at. He connects with this voice in this journal and the experiences of this voice in this journal. He connects with that where it's at wholeheartedly. So just in the end, with such a completely and utterly fleshed out character, you are bound to be interested in everything that happens to him, everything that he does, and everything that he himself is interested in. So Archimboldi is just top 3 most interesting characters ever, and completely and utterly fleshed out in an intelligent, wholehearted, whole-brained manner. The last 2 on this list might be a little bit obvious if you've ever watched any other video that I've posted before, but sitting at number 2, I would say that Samuel Hamilton from East of Eden is easily one of the greatest characters ever written. My opinion aside, he is one of the greatest. Samuel Hamilton is this wise and kind and inventive farmer whose decency and optimism for life really contrast with kind of the darker forces that are at play around him and around this book. And what he lacks monetarily is made up for his just lust for life and his love for life. So while he's poor in actual money, he is very rich in spirit. And through his goodness and his optimism, he really embodies the fact that being good and being pure are better than being powerful and being successful. And so he is really like he as a character is a really major theme of this story, that being good is better than being great. And he really serves as like a guiding light to a lot of characters in this book, specifically Adam Trask, who is really struggling kind of to emotionally understand a lot of the things that have happened in his life. And Samuel Hamilton can kind of guide these characters with his goodness, with his light, just being who he is in this generous and humorous way. He can kind of help these other characters navigate their loss and their misunderstandings and their just not knowing what to do in their lives. And so through Samuel's humor and curiosity and compassion, he can really ground the novel's widescaping biblical themes. He can ground them in humanity and morality and in a way that is essentially human, even with this larger theme and this larger biblical understanding going on around him. So he just has this general human warmth that the novel is able to ground itself upon and build upon. And as he ages and as he kind of declines, you have this really bittersweet kind of feeling towards him as he connects to this older generation that is aging out, and you can really reflect upon those who are older than you and how they are still good, and you can think about what they did for you and what they did for your society and your community and just the world. Because he really is a part of this, older idealistic generation that you can think more deeply upon with him as a figure of. So even though he has no monetizable ability, he is this very good craftsman and carpenter, and he can do things really, really well, but he clearly doesn't care about money too much. As long as he has his family that he loves so much, he is okay and his family is okay. And so just through this really honest and diligent character, you just have this lifelong love and warmth for Samuel Hamilton. So that is why he is easily sitting at number 2 on my favorite characters of all time. And lastly, my favorite character of all time, and I think that anyone who has read this book will absolutely agree with me, Gus from Lonesome Dove is absolutely my favorite character ever. He is this warm and witty and this rich storyteller that really gives Lonesome Dove its warmth and what makes people love this book so much. He's this larger-than-life Texas Ranger that just really has a lust for life and can be both reflective and funny and welcoming in ways that root all of the characters together and bring all of the characters to him. And so he's really able to connect with these people, even though he comes off as this nonchalant guy. So past this easygoing surface, he is really reflective about friendship and community and his purpose and just kind of the aging out of the Wild West and how the Wild West is changing. And he is no longer this larger than life Texas Ranger that he used to be. And so I do think that Gus can really serve as like the emotional center of this story because he interacts with all levels of people welcomingly and warmly. Like, whether it's like a hand, like a ranch hand, or whether it's, some outcast or something, he really welcomes in everybody and is just a being of human connection. So just this enduring spirit of life and this love for life and adventure that just defined who he was as a person is what makes this book linger on you for so very long after you're done with it. So in the end, just overall, Gus is such a charismatic character that you literally cannot help loving, and a lot of the other characters in the book cannot help loving him, even if they find him annoying or if they think he's a bum and not working hard enough for the rest of the group. Everybody loves Gus and they just can't help themselves. And so he really serves as a core of this story of just love and warmth and adventure and lust for life. And I think that that's what makes this book so good, and that's what makes his character so interesting. And so he is easily my favorite character of all time. So I know that I have talked a lot about, my favorite books of all time or just books that I love all the time. So I did really want to talk to you guys about characters that make these books so much fun and that just make reading in general so much fun. So I know that a couple of these books were on my top 10 favorite books of all time list that a lot of you guys, I think, found me originally from. A lot of these books were on that list as well. And I think that a really good character and just general characters that populate a story, like East of Eden, I know that I chose to talk about Samuel Hamilton, but Lee easily should have probably been on this list too. So just characters are largely what make stories so great. I think that a lot of people focus on one aspect of why they love to read. Some people really love plot. Some people really love prose. Some people really love characters, maybe philosophy. Characters are what makes a story a full and a giving story. So I just wanted to talk about my favorite characters of all time. This was a top 10 list, but it was really difficult to nail down. Like, there were a lot of characters that I wanted to put on here, but I didn't feel like I could fit them on a top 10 list. And kind of even the order is difficult to nail down. I think these are in order, but in the end, there's just so many characters that I love so very deeply and that I feel a rich and deep and thoughtful connection with that I just needed to talk about them. So I would love it if you guys could share with me maybe some of your favorite characters of all time. I have the feeling that a lot of you will say Gus and a lot of you will say Lee or Samuel Hamilton, because I know that these are two of the greatest characters ever, and I fully agree with you. So I hope that I will see you next weekend, and thank you so much for watching till the very end. Bye-bye.